Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of The Final Whistle on lermedia.tv. And our usual email pertains to the programme, which is info@lermedia.tv. And any comments are welcome. And we'd like to thank, this is our fourth edition of this show. It's just beginning. And we want to pay tribute to the people who are contributing to the show, but all the people who took the time to watch it as well. The figures are very good. And we're delighted with it, but that's the quality of the people we have on the show. There's no doubt about that. It has nothing to do with myself, I can tell you that much. But anyway.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Martin Waters, we're delighted to have you on the show. Welcome, Martin, and to the Final Whistle. Great to have you, Martin. Welcome. Well, we have an old hand now, Derwynne Honan. He's back in again for more punishment tonight. Derwynne, fair play. Welcome to the show.
No worries. Glad to be here.
And welcome Jimmy O'Brien to the show as well.
You're more than welcome, Pat. More than welcome. Anytime. Anytime. I know it breaks your heart that I come here and take the piss out of you, but anyway, look. Can't find anybody else to abuse you in quite such a charming way.
Well, fair play to you. I mean, you're the man that's stuck. You're the go-to man. Is that what you want to say?
Well, goat, maybe. Rather than go-to. Goat as in the greatest of all time, not the furry little animal.
Now,
we're good music band.
We're in the middle of the very beginning of the European Championships 2022 and 2021, sorry. But it has been covered extensively, but obviously anybody who was watching the Denmark-Finland game saw the cardiac arrest of Christensen. And thankfully, he's okay. He's recovered, and some of them don't, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it gives a whole new meaning that life is short, and really we should appreciate it. But we're not wishing the man any ill will, obviously. But it's such a shock. Martin, did you see the match at all?
Actually, I was out when the match was on, but I got a kind of an alert on my phone. I think it was from one of the news outlets, Irish Times, I think it was, and. I just saw it and I was like immediately kind of taken aback by it. I actually contacted a friend of mine to see like what actually happened, and he said it just didn't look good. That the guy collapsed in the middle of a game, and suddenly when I got home, I saw what happened. But and how the story unfolded. That the guy was practically dead on the pitch, and I suppose it just shows that in the modern game now the importance of first aid, the importance of having medical people so close to the pitch and available to these professionals to assist them in such kind of, it could have been such a tragedy. It was phenomenal the way his teammates reacted. He's captain who administered first aid to him as he lay on the field. And how he rallied around his teammates to actually shield him while he was being taken care of by the medics. And essentially all those little steps accumulated to saving the guy's life,
Yeah. Derwynne, did you see it yourself?
I did, yeah. It was just shocking, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it goes to show, lads, before I come to you, Jim, that I know I got training in defibrillator. I did 3 different courses, and I'm well able to use them, thank God. But it goes to show a simple thing like a defibrillator. I'm not saying it can save a life without a shadow of a doubt, and quick thinking with people. Jimmy, did you get to see it when you were watching?
I didn't. I was actually out at a match. What struck me about it is how quickly the true story came out, and this is playing into my wheelhouse of social media and all that. But we instantly got to hear the story, and we heard the story very factually. We heard that the captain said he couldn't get a pulse. The first medic who examined him said he couldn't hear a heartbeat. Not quite the same thing. And then after that, it went crazy. The number of stories, Harry, he's all right. He's only fainted. It was a bad tackle. The amount of bullshit that came out. However, one thing it did point out is, I don't know if you could do this, Pat. Certainly I couldn't. In Shannon, apart from Wolftones GAA Club and the golf club in Shannon, I couldn't tell you in the town of Shannon of 10,000 people, where is there a defibrillator? I don't know where there is one. Do you?
Well, in Shannon, not to get bogged down, in Shannon, most of the defibrillators are locked up, unfortunately, in the evening, because they are in premises that are used by day, which is a problem, I'm sure, not alone in Shannon, but so there, I know where
All over, yeah.
But some of the, as I said, schools, they're locked up in the evening, and that's the end of it, you know?
Yeah, it's mad. I mean, that's my point. I'm not highlighting Shannon's issues.
Oh, no, but I agree with you.
There really have to be. I remember a long time ago, I was down in Clonmel, and Clonmel Urban Council, or the UDC, Urban District Council, were seriously agitating for some information system, so that when somebody collapsed in the town, that there would be some way that they could find out within seconds rather than minutes where the nearest defibrillator was and who was the nearest qualified person that could come along. The crazy thing is that was nearly 20 years ago, and the crazy thing is they had no answers. They had 7 or 8 defibrillators scattered around the town, and they had no way of getting a message out to anybody at the time. It really beggars belief. But they are life-saving. I mean, I remember, Pat, and I'm sure you got trained on the early ones. On the early ones, the training was rather difficult. But on the more modern ones, you just search for where you put the pads and then press go, and the thing does everything. It gauges how much of a shock you need, when to turn it on, when to turn it off, and the whole lot. So it's very, very simple, and it's life-saving. I mean, he was a young man, still a young man. I mean, I'd have to say, as an Irishman who cringed at the hiding we got at the hands of Christian Eriksen in the knockout competitions in a previous European competition, the horrible, heartless comment about why didn't that effing well happen to him when he was playing against Ireland. But apart from that, he's still only a young man, and for him to get a heart attack like
29, is it 29?
29, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, Martin, you're an active man. Obviously, you're probably a third of my age at this stage, or half it anyway. But I mean, you cycle a lot, right? And you run a lot. And how is it that not many know, but of course, you always hear of the exceptional death because it's such a shock when people like in their 20s or 30s drop dead. You know?
Yeah.
But it has happened to people like runners and cyclists a lot, Martin, as you know.
Yeah, I suppose it's important to get checked yourself now. Professional footballers obviously will get checked quite a lot, and they do a lot of work in the background around the medicine and ensure that they're healthy and fit, and they do fitness constantly. But from an amateur perspective, I suppose it's something that everybody would put in the long finger maybe, and maybe don't think about it until something happens. So I suppose it's a wake-up call really for everybody that participates in sport, that to get yourself checked. Like, you just never know, there might be something in the background that you're not aware of, and it's always worth your while having a checkup with your doctor, or arranging something with a medical professional to see how everything is, and is the heart okay, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a wake-up call, and I know I'm involved with underage GA and soccer. And, it brought to light to me that, how the importance of having first aid officers when we play matches and things like that. And, to have that experience on the sideline, so that if something does go wrong, you have somebody that can come in quite quickly, not panic, and look after the person until the right people come along.
That's right, yeah. Derwynne, and we leave that in, and we wish Christian Eriksen all the very best health, and as I said, the man is a young man, and we wish him the best, despite his fantastic record against the Republic of Ireland. But we wish him the very best anyway. Derwynne,
sorry, Pat. Could I ask Martin a question there? I always wondered, up until very recently. I'm still not sure the answer I was given was correct. But when you look at rugby players, there's a lump in the middle of their back, in between their shoulder blades. And I was told that that's a heart monitor. Is that true? Do you know?
I don't think so. I think that's more for GPS tracking.
Yeah, it's a
And-
tracker to see what they're
Yeah.
running.
Yeah, see how much distance they cover. Now,
Yeah,
whether it triggers, whether they wear a heart strap as well, I'm not sure. I know in some sports, like in cycling, for example, all the cyclists would wear a strap around the chest that would be
Right.
constantly monitoring their heart rate. Runners might wear something on their wrist, which would monitor their pulse and stuff like that as well. And so that all that data is relayed back to a system where they can actually see not only how much distance the athlete has covered, but also how quickly they have recovered after, certain bursts of pace and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I see.
So like the GPS, now whether the rugby players wear heart rate monitors, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sort of, I would, even if it's not, I would have thought after Christian Eriksen, surely there should be a movement now that if they certainly sports like rugby and, God forgive me for mentioning it, Gaelic football, games that would have a significant cardiac effect element of them. Surely it makes sense to add to something that they're wearing a monitor, because I mean, if you can use a small little smartwatch to gauge somebody's heart rate and even their blood pressure, not too very accurately, but you can, and it's only for a short space of time. Surely that's something that should be borne in mind. Can't be that much to be added to it.
Daley Blind, the Dutch player,
Yeah.
he's playing with exactly the same symptom, and he's got a pacemaker. He's got a pacemaker inside him that actually gives him the shock if his heart muscle goes into that spasm.
All right.
So but he can't. So Italian football won't allow anything like that to be in the game, but all the other football associations allow that kind of thing. But Daley Blind last year collapsed, and that's when he got this defibrillator fitted inside his. I'm going to call it a pacemaker, but he got that fitted last year.
That's interesting, Derwynne. And as you're on now, since the European champ, we leave that bit there, and we wish the lad Christian Eriksen the very best of health. Anyway, now the European Championships began last Friday night with the team I fancy to win the whole thing, Italy. But it's England, Derwynne, I want to ask you about, because we had a good slag last time you were here about England. But I want to ask you about on a serious level, if you can take England seriously, that is speaking. But no, all jokes aside, did you see the match with England and Croatia?
I did.
Yeah, and what is your impression of that English team? I know it's only the first game and in the group and all of that, and all of these things are result oriented.
I think they got a bit lucky, to be honest. I was watching. I can't remember who was saying it, but one of the pundits was saying that last year in the World Cup, when they played Croatia, they never got hold of Modric in the middle. No one was sort of touch tight to him. And you watch that game on Sunday, and again, they were giving Modric so much room. And, I'm thinking, well, would Grealish be better in there, just, falling over him all the time, maybe pushing him down a bit. But I just thought that they let him run that middle part of the pitch a little bit too much.
Did you see it, Jimmy, the English match?
I did, and I would agree that England were looking. Now maybe I was looking at it through green-coloured spectacles, but one of the things that I noticed today, just in the sports pages, Jamie Carragher was making a comment about how it's time to stop putting Harry Kane on a pedestal and just treat him as being an ordinary player. And to which I would say, sorry, Derwynne, as I've always said, English players are built up by the English press. And I've always believed they've been built up a little bit more than they're entitled to be. So for Carragher, who's been going on for ages about, how Harry Kane is the best thing since the sliced pan, and United should be buying him, and City should buy him, and Liverpool would love to have him but really can't afford him, blah, 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 blah. For he to then turn around and say, we have to take Harry Kane down off his pedestal, is a bit silly. But I'm just wondering, are the English media coming to terms with the fact that Europe saw the same match that they saw and didn't see a team of world beaters? Because they weren't. And they were quite lucky with the goal. I mean, the goal got a deflection. It was the only decent thing that they did. Calvin Phillips played a fine through ball. Raheem Sterling was onto it like shit off a shovel, took a shot, and it bounced off the defender and went into the goal. So they never looked like scoring another goal, and that looked to be fairly lucky. And Croatia are an aging team. I mean, Modric ruled the game. That was 3 years ago, and he's no spring chicken now either. So the only good thing for England is they're in a very soft group. Looking at Scotland today, for God's sake, if they can't, I can see England and Croatia being the two teams to come out of their group and get beaten in the first round of the knockouts, because neither of them were any good. When you compare them against
one, then two, then plays it into Sterling. That will do nicely. England in. Raheem Sterling's first major.
When you compare them against Holland,
did you see
just a few hours later?
Did you see the match, Martin?
Yeah, I did, and it's always important to get off to a good start, and if it's an ugly 1-0 win, so be it. You take it. I think in many tournaments in the past, England didn't get off to a good start, and they're kind of chasing there on afterwards, and they'll pull off some results that will get them through to the next phase, and then they're built up to this crescendo where they're expected to win the tournament, and then something goes against them and they lose on penalties, and that's kind of been the script for England for the last number of tournaments. This side are not.
I think, Martin, sorry, I think one of the worst problems that England has is the problem that I touched on there. They've been built up by their press. They're walking out for the first game of any tournament, and the Sun and the Star are all telling anybody who wants to know how this is England's year. The first major competition since 1966. Jesus, 1966. And they're going to win it. They have the best centre forward. Donkey Maguire is the second best centre half in the world. They have the three best right full backs in the world. They've got a very young, very talented midfield, and they struggled against Croatia. I think they were nervous. I hate to admit it. Mary will be glad to hear me saying this, but I think England are better than they were against Croatia. But I think as long as they go out on the pitch, and Jim, you're 100% right, Martin, as long as they go out there being told you're the best in the world, you're going to win this competition, they're just going to stumble all the time.
Don't dwell too much on one team, but I think England will beat Scotland and the Czech Republic very handily, and I think they'll top their group. But after that, I suppose it depends on who they're going to get there. And I didn't look at the draw, but the Dutch, to me, were pretty good as well.
Except they took their foot off the pedal. Yeah. They came very close to only getting the point out of that game. Yeah. And they were by far and away the better team out on the pitch for the entire game.
No, Anyway, we'll leave the soccer there. We'll go back to the soccer later on in the programme, but you're watching the final whistle here on LairMedia.tv. And our usual email is info@lairmedia.tv. If you have any comments, we don't mind what you say. We'll read every one of them out regardless, and we'll put the bleeps in as well. Now, Martin, I was talking to you today on the phone, but the Tour de France is beginning on the 24th of this month. Is that correct?
I think it's the 26th. The 26th of, it'll be Saturday, the 26th of June. It starts in the north of France, and I suppose anybody that's into cycling will know it's a 3-week stage race. So you'll have 21 stages within the race, run over a 3-week period. It's grueling as always, where they take the cyclists through the various mountainous regions of France. But they probably have stages set up for all categories of cyclists. So you would have the I suppose the climbers, you have the sprinters, and then you have the guys that can do everything, and they're the guys that usually come out on top and win the yellow jersey. I suppose when I reflect back on my childhood, I can remember like the likes of Stephen Roach and winning the Tour in '87, and I can remember Sean Kelly trying so hard to win it, and never quite getting there. Yet he was a prolific winner in everything else. Nowadays, the kind of the game has changed, where it's very, very much. Well, it was always team orientated, but even more so now. And you can see like the teams have, certain teams have the best riders, and they seem to come out on top because they protect their main man, make sure he gets over the mountains, make sure he's always in the right place, make sure he's never in the wind. And that he's always fresh towards the finish, So it's become very much a tactical, team-orientated sport, when before it might have been perceived as very much individualistic. But that has kind of changed dramatically in the modern era of cycling. From an Irish perspective, you would have Sam Bennett, who won the green jersey last year, which is the points classification.
Yeah, and Sean Kelly's jersey as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he won it 4 times, maybe 5. Yeah. I can't quite remember. It was either 4 or 5 times. I think Sean Kelly won it, but Bennett won it last year, and he's from Carrick-on-Shore, which is where I think that's where Kelly is from as well. So they're the same neck of the woods. But he's there's a kind of a doubt over him at the moment with a knee injury that he's had. He picked up in training, so whether he makes it to the start line this year is still unknown. But you do have Nicholas Roach, who's the son of Stephen Roach, who's competing. And you'll have Dan Martin, who's the actual nephew of Stephen Roach, who will also be competing. So there will be Irish cyclists there.
Yeah, I was glad
maybe not Sam Bennett.
I was glad you reminded me of that, because I didn't know that Dan Martin and Nicholas Roach were related, But of course, it's in the genes, as we say, in the breeding. Exactly. Yeah, in the breeding. Who do you think? I mean, of course, you're younger than I am. I remember the great Eddie Merckx and the old black and white and all of that. But who should we be looking out for? Or do you want to think about that for a while? Who should we be looking out for this year?
Well, there's a lot of young guys coming through now. So the guy that won it last year, Pogačar, is from Slovenia. And he was one of the youngest ever winners of the Tour de France last year. You have another Slovenian called Roglic, who was second, I think, last year and has never won it. But again, he's Slovenian. He was actually a former skier. So, these guys have great lung capacity. I think I was actually reading something not so long ago about Greg LeMond, who also was a skier before he took up cycling. He actually only took up cycling as basically as a means of keeping fit when there was no snow. So in the off season, he would cycle, and when the snow would come, he would go back skiing. But he actually realized that cycling, he was actually quite good at it. And, he was the first non-European to win the Tour de France in 1986, I think it was. Yeah. So these guys have pedigrees in other sports, and they've transitioned across to cycling. And they're being very successful. And there's also a Colombian cyclist who recently won the Giro Italia with the British team. it was formerly Team Sky. It's now called Ineos Grenadiers or something like that. But they'll always have someone there. I think they have Geraint Thomas, who's Welsh, and he won the Tour. I think it was probably 2 years ago now, or maybe 3 years ago. So he would be a favourite to win it this year as well.
And Martin, before the cynic in me, I mean, obviously cycling was down for a long time because of the Armstrong year, we'll say. But I think you're right. It has made somewhat of a comeback, has it? Now, I
think so.
The Team Sky for me, I'm only looking in from the outside with a passing interest. I wouldn't have a deep knowledge of it. So it's amazing the amount of people who are on medication on Team Sky. Medication thrown in by the airplane because they were asthmatic. I mean, how can an asthmatic be a professional cyclist? Can you riddle me that, Martin?
I don't know. I'm not an asthmatic myself, so I have no idea. But I actually did play like a lot of team sports when I was younger, and some of my friends had asthma, but like asthma wasn't a barrier to participating in sport.
Oh no, I'm not saying that.
They just took their inhaler and away they went. And if they were feeling a bit gassed, they took another puff of the inhaler and away they went. So like sometimes, like this thing about medication and stuff like that can be there can be a lot read into it, but from the sport itself, like from my perspective, and the performances are very much believable and nowadays, and what you see a lot of the guys that were good junior cyclists now becoming good and really they're becoming the top kind of senior cyclists, so they've transitioned from good juniors into good pros, and that's always a good sign when you see that in a sport. And there's nobody coming from nowhere and all of a sudden becoming a world champion. That doesn't seem to be happening.
No one recovering from cancer, God forbid, and becoming the Tour de France winner. But Derwynne,
could I ask Martin as sort of an unfair question here? The whole Lance Armstrong thing, the whole scandal of he denying for years when he had been doing it for years. And it was an Irish guy, Paul Kimmage, who was like a dog with a bone, who chased this and said it was true and it was, something needed to be done. Has he been ostracized by the cycling community over his attitude towards Armstrong? Because you don't hear much about him now. I would have thought he should have been a hero. Paul Kimmage should have got every medal that was going in cycling for his courage, if nothing else. But he just seems to have faded away. Why is that?
I was involved with a cycling club a number of years ago, and we invited Paul Kimmage down to Limerick to actually do a kind of a Q&A thing. It was a fundraiser for it. It was kind of a charity event, and he was very engaging and he was excellent with his time, and the audience absolutely lapped it up because it wasn't just about cycling, it was about other sports. And I think Paul was writing, or I'd finished writing with the Sunday Times at that point. But I wouldn't think he would be like, there's different views out there, like from my own perspective, he's like, I read his book, Rough Riding. I definitely recommend it for anybody that has a passing interest or an interest in cycling, to get the perspective of a guy that was in the pro peloton and saw it firsthand what was happening, and has outlined within his book what he saw with his own eyes, and why he decided to step away from the sport and to actually write about it. It's a tough one to answer. I actually remember when I was a kid seeing him on the Late Late Show, was being interviewed by Gay Byrne, and it was like as if like nobody believed him. Like, how could he say these things about these heroes, but I suppose what he was giving was the insight. And in cycling, they call it omerta, and basically omerta is like you keep your mouth shut and you don't spit in the soup, you know what I mean, that type of thing. And they would say that he broke the omerta. So they say he broke the omerta, and that he did, like, and a lot of guys, like, he actually outlines in his book, like, a lot of guys, this was their only avenue of income. It was their only thing. They didn't have education. They didn't have a career to fall back on. Cycling was everything, and they had to make it. And I suppose when you put that to a guy's head, you probably would be surprised at what he might,
How he might
be
react.
persuaded to do.
And
when your contract is on the line, things like that.
Yeah, I know you're dead right there. And Paul, I mean, I contacted him once, but I gave up because he was very busy. He's a very busy man, but maybe he might have more time now. Derwynne, and would you have an interest down the Tour de France, or did you ever interest in watching cycling?
Yeah, I like watching it. I find it really interesting. I can't remember which mountain it is. The one that's like a vertical slope.
Yeah.
I can't remember which stage that is, but it's the one I always want to watch. That one. I'd like to go actually and see that one because they look like they're actually.
Yeah.
They look like they're actually going to stop cycling at some stage and get off and push it.
I actually went over a number of years ago. I went over. I did 2 trips to the Alps, and we stayed at the bottom of Alpe d'Huez in a hotel there, and so we were like 5-minute cycle from the base of Alpe d'Huez, which is a 13-kilometer, just over 13-kilometer cycle up a mountain. And I just remember getting to the start of where you start climbing, and I looked up and I just said to myself, how in the love of God am I going to get up to the top of this? Like, and I could see a guy in the distance about 500 meters ahead of me, and he was getting off his bike at that point.
Wow.
But I think willpower and stubbornness got me up there. But it's a phenomenal place, and when you do it and when you see it firsthand, you realize how tough these guys are. And it really is.
I still love it. Anyway. I still love the Tour de France now. I mean, recently I've gone back looking at it on the telly, as Derwynne was saying, and it's still a great spectacle. And Jimmy, of course, you're coming from a county that's steeped in cycling as well. Watford. The home.
Yeah, well, we'll happily engage in that argument as to whether or not Carrickbeg, which is where Sean Roach was from, Sean Kelly was from, is actually on the Watford side, and Sam Bennett also is from Carrickbeg. So they're actually from Watford, but the horse have been stolen by Tipperary. But cycling has always been wickedly popular. We've never had a terribly successful cyclist, but a lot of guys knocking on the door. I can remember the milk race years ago. Sorry?
Remember Shea Elliott?
Yeah, look, that's a long time ago.
I can remember the Nissan Classic as well. The Nissan Classic was run in Ireland in the 80s and 90s, and that was a stage race at the end of the season, so it was run in September. I remember we get a half day from school to actually, because it would pass through Limerick, and we get a half day from school to actually go and watch it. And I remember seeing Roach and Kelly and all them cycling, doing laps of the city in Limerick and the finish line at in O'Connell Street, right in the heart of the city. It was such a spectacle. It was such a fantastic event.
I remember them, Martin, going up Patrick's Hill in Cork. I went down to see them in Patrick's Hill in Cork City. My God, that's a straight part of the city. For anyone who knows Cork City, I'll tell you, you'll find it very difficult to drive up there, to mind cycle up there, to drive a van. It's never recommended to drive up there. You come down from the other side.
Yeah.
If you know Cork City. But anyway, the Final Whistle is a program on lairmedia.tv, and our email is info@lairmedia.tv. Now, Derwynne, you're going to give us the winner of the US Open, are you, tonight?
Well, there's kind of 3 people that the bookies have gone like heavy on.
Yeah.
One favourite's John Rahm. And you've got to admit, he was in great form at that Memorial until COVID strikes.
Yeah.
Then they've got Koepka behind him. And then they've got DeChambeau.
Well, Koepka and DeChambeau, I suppose, are the pin-up boys at the moment of golf, are they?
I think so. I mean, the attraction is obviously the distance.
Yeah.
Where's it being played, though, Derwynne?
Sorry, Jim?
Where's it being played?
Being played at Torrey Pines. Torrey Pines is really a really interesting place as such because
does that not militate against the big hitters? The US Open typically is landing it on a postage stamp in the middle of the fairway and hitting it into a handkerchief on the greens, or you land in a nice wide fairway, and you have to hit it onto a green that's 150 feet up in the air. So it doesn't suit the guys who bait the ball, essentially. So I would fancy Ram, all right, but I don't think that's a DeChambeau or a Koepka course. Maybe it's time for Jordan Spieth to come back. He'd make his way around that course quite well.
It'll be an interesting test because, I mean, Torrey Pines off those back tees is nearly 8,000 yards.
Yep.
I mean, that's 7,800. Well, it's nearly 7,900, which is just mind-boggling when you think, your average golf course is about 6.2, and getting up at that distance. The Torrey Pines. So the north, they got two courses there, the north and the south, and they use the south for the big tournaments, whether it's the Buick or the US Open. But you've got 9 holes that basically run around on the edge of that cliff, and then you've got 9 holes that are a little bit inland and set back from the cliffs. But you've got and it's not like the front 9 or the back 9. It's literally like 4 or 5 holes on the front or 4 or 5 on the back that are on that cliff, and it's picturesque. Like, you can't imagine how pretty it is. I've played Torrey Pines, and it is just breathtakingly pretty. But at that kind of distance, you nearly I'd say you're taking a third of the field out just on length. There's going to be X amount of people who it'd be a really interesting stat to see who makes the cut on what their average driving distances are throughout the course of the season, because it's going to be the guys who can smash it.
And Derwynne, would you give Shane Lowry any chance?
Yeah, they've got Lowry sort of at 25 to 1, I think. And if you said to me as a not an outside bet, but he's a really good bet because he's been playing well. He's running into some form, and I would definitely put him down for the Open coming up at Royal St George's.
Yeah, and what about McIlroy?
I don't know. I think some of it with McIlroy needs to sort his head out. Really, I don't think it's not his golf swing, is it? It's not he's got more talent than most people could have shake a stick at. But I think some of that is in his head as well. But I think we spoke last time. His tour average is 3 yards behind DeChambeau on tour average, and he went chasing after that distance thing. I think Cowan's probably straightening him out somewhat. But you don't know. I mean, it's a bit of I wouldn't say it's a lottery, but there's, who knows who's going to win it. I mean, it'll be interesting watching it come Sunday afternoon, that's for sure.
And Martin, have you an interest in golf, Martin?
Yeah, I played a small bit when I was, I suppose, when you stop playing team sports, you try to look for something else. And I took up golf in my late 20s, and I played for a good while. I kind of stopped when my sons were born, so I haven't played now in a while, but I did manage to get down to 10 at one point, and I was kind of interested. I was developing this kind of I was getting familiar with the course and building it up. But I was just, when Derwynne was talking there about the guys, I just remember the years and years ago, golfers, the distances it was all about accuracy. It was all about your your timing. It was all about putting, and I remember when John Daly came on the scene to win I think it was the USPGA that time, and it was Dixie. There was this guy came out of nowhere, and he was just out driving everybody. And then Bubba Watson comes along, and he's doing it. And now you have DeChambeau and you have Koepka. I'm just wondering, is it, I suppose, from a golf aficionado, somebody that's a passing interest, it's fantastic to see just this, this power. But from somebody that's consumed with golf, and somebody that loves golf, and somebody that is passionate about it, how do you feel about this? Where golf courses are being overpowered by these guys. I often find that we're missing those shot making things, like the Sevis used to, and you sometimes miss those kind of that bit of genius.
I think it's two things really, Martin. One is the ball. The ball is the major factor in all of this. Drivers are. I don't think there's that much difference between a driver now from 10, 12, 15 years ago, really. You know, there's a limit to what the driver can do. Golf ball's got a limit on it as well. But I think it's a combination of golf ball has changed. It's actually quite hard to hit that ball other than straight. You've got a club face that is making the ball fly straighter. You've got golf balls that are flying straighter anyway. And then whack into the fact that these guys spend probably more time in a gym than they do actually playing golf or hitting balls in practice. You know, you've now got very athletic looking athletes. And I can't believe as a golf pro for the last 41 years, I can't believe I'm actually saying golfers are athletes, because before they were just golfers.
Remember the one.
And certainly weren't athletes.
They weren't athletes. Some were athletes in the 19th. Others, you know, to when you see them up close, and I've been fortunate enough to stand on tees and on practice grounds with them, you know, the distance that some of these guys are hitting it. You know, DeChambeau uses a launch monitor company, and the rep for the launch monitor company has actually got him tracked at 400 yards on one shot. You know, and that when you think of
That's
400, you know, that's getting into like 12, 14 seconds of hang time, which, you know, I think Woods at his peak was sort of just about touching double figures sometimes. You know, it was like 9 seconds. And when they start hitting it at that kind of distance, you kind of just go, you know, it's not a game. You think of Nicholas saying that, you know, Nicholas was, you know, Bobby Jones would say, I'm not familiar with Nicholas's game because he hits it so far. You know, you think how far he hit it, and now you think how far they hit it in comparison. You know, they're like 100 odd yards past him. And
yeah, we have lost, in my opinion, one thing. I remember when Woods won the Open in St Andrews, he was asked, how did you, you know, what do you put your success down to in St Andrews? And St Andrews is famous for having 10 bunkers on every hole. I don't know how many it has, but it's got a wagon load of bunkers. And when Woods was asked, what do you put your success down to? He won by 3 or 4 shots, which in an Open is quite a fairly significant win. And he says, I didn't go into a bunker. And they looked at it afterwards. He didn't get into one bunker. No fairway bunkers, no greenside bunkers. And he just managed his way around the course. I think, and they've spoken about, and we mentioned this the last time, Derwynne,
Yeah.
I think what they're going to have to do is lay the course out on the basis that the huge hitters have a fairway about 6 yards wide, with bunkers on both sides in their landing area, and the short hitters, where they would normally land, is also 6 yards wide, so that they're leveling the playing field off the tee. And I think that's the only place where the playing field has to be leveled, is off the tee.
Whenever people talk to me about stuff like this, I always, the one thing that I always kind of cling on to is the sheer fact, you know, if you think of the open rotor, what's the hardest hole on the open rotor of 10 courses? And that's the postage stamp at True. And it's actually the shortest hole on the open rotor as well. So, you know, I look at it and I think if they made the greens smaller, protected them a bit more, grew the rough in a little bit, like you said there, it becomes strategic.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd say about that is don't forget these guys can hit 5-irons like 240. So
but it's the stop.
You're taking the driver out the bag, but you're not actually really stopping anything happening.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't the being able to hit a long iron a long way won't give you control on the greens. I played with a pro out in Portugal in the year 2000 on one of the, we played on Vila Moura, costs a fortune, but we actually played it there. And there's a hole in Villamora, which is par 4, that's drivable. But there's no way you can put your drive on the green. And I played with the pro in Shannon, Archie Pike, and I said, Archie, how the God's name? Now, I wasn't driving the green, but I said, how are you going to birdie this hole? I said, you can't get your ball on the green. Easy peasy, he said. I'm going to put my drive in that bunker, and I'll stick my bunker shot to a couple of inches. And that's exactly what he did. Just didn't bother trying to avoid any trouble. He knew, and this is where I'm heading with this.
Oh, yeah.
He knew that he had a brilliant bunker capability. So landing in the bunker wasn't an issue for him. So he just rolled straight in the bunker, back out to a couple of inches.
It's interesting what you say there about the bunkers, because when you think about Kira Island, you know, they basically, there were no bunkers.
Yeah, they were dirt. Yeah.
They were just, I mean, there are bunkers there, but they actually just classified everything as just part of the golf course, and you play it as it lies. And they were playing it, you know, you go back 100 years, you didn't have rakes in bunkers. You played it the way it was left, and stuff like that. And to me, there's an element of, like, I think we all forget just how good these guys have got. You know, they are unbelievable around the greens. They're great putters.
Yes.
And they're putting on surfaces that are perfect.
Yeah.
You know, I sometimes, I coach a few guys on tour, and you watch them when they come back to the club and they hit balls on the practice putting green. They don't look so good because the putting green is bouncy and bumpy and they don't look so good, right?
Yeah.
But when you get them back out there on billiard tables, which are pristine, they'll just putt the eyes out. But, if you latch up everything that these guys are doing, they're very fit. They've got great equipment. They've got the best of everything. They've got the coaching coming up. I think coaching as well. A lot of the governing bodies, the PGAs, there's been a huge improvement in the standard of coaching. So I think the coaching, the equipment, the golf courses are better prepared. They look, they're manicured better than what they would have been years ago. Yeah. So I think there's a combination of everything. But, if you can hit the ball further than someone else and you're going in with a shorter iron, it's a lot easier game than it is going in with a longer iron.
Yeah.
And before we get off of golf, Derwynne, I want to ask you about a golfer I've admired for years. Not a big hitter, Louis Oosthuizen. I think he's a perfect example of a golfer that manages his way around the course.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Oosthuizen's short, though. I mean, he hits it a long way. He might not be in Brooks and the Shambo's bracket.
I know what.
He hits it a long way, but he's got an all-round good game, and he putts well, chips well. Yeah. He does every little department of that golf game. He does well. And, there's an element of luck as well. They get the right draw. Torrey Pines can be fogged out. That you get the right side of the draw, everything could happen.
Yeah.
But it's still,
if you're out in the morning when it's raining or out in the afternoon when it's windy, different course altogether.
Now, Martin, you have no excuse to get your handicap down from 10 to 5. You have a coach there, and you have 200 to cheer you on.
Yeah.
More encouragement do you need to take up the golf again,
Yeah, but it's good news to hear that the ball has made you hit the ball. Actually, the change in whatever they've done with the ball, that you can actually the ball will go a lot straighter now. That's good news for all amateurs.
Actually, funny enough, Derwynne, if you
believe it goes straighter, but
that's why I give up. That's why I give up golf. I was always looking at the wrong place, and the ball was away.
Following on but from what Martin said there, I remember quite a few years ago, one of the better golfers in Shannon, they were talking about improvements, and he was saying that the coaching is better and the clubs are better and the courses are better manicured, but without doubt, the most astounding leaps forward in golf technology has been the golf ball. Between the Pro Vs and all of these balls that will...
I could tell you a real funny story. So I was coached by Bernard Hunt, the ex-Ryder Cup player, Ryder Cup captain, everything else. He was like, you know, he was my boss and he was coaching me, and I played a lot of golf with him. Back in his heyday, when he was winning things on the tour, he had a brass ring that was made by one of the members for him that was actually 1.62 in diameter. And he was contracted to a leading ball manufacturer. And he used to get dozens and dozens of balls sent to him. And all he did every day was push a new ball through the ring. Did it go through the ring? If it went through the ring too easy, he used to mark it, because that's the ball I'm going to use in the wind, because it's actually smaller than what regulations are. Then he would get another ball, and he couldn't push it through the ring. This was in the same dozen box. Now, he would save that, because when he used to go and play in the Ryder Cup in America, he would say, oh, I'm going to use that ball. It's a bit bigger. It sits up better on the fairways. Great. But that, now, you do that with a modern dozen golf balls.
They'll all be exactly the same.
Through there without a shadow of doubt. He used to put some of them through, and they weren't even round. and you kind of go, wow, that's, you know, if we said that was probably 30 years, 40 years ago,
yeah,
you know, it's not that long ago.
No.
You could get a dozen balls that were supposed to be 1.62, and some were and some weren't. I mean,
that's right. That's very interesting. And we have all the before we get off of golf, we have all the heavy hitters coming to the Irish Open this year down in Mount Juliet. From the Irish perspective, we have McIlroy and Lowry, Harrington and McDowell, and obviously Dunn and Cam. They're all going to be playing in the Irish Open, which will be a fantastic occasion. I was standing behind, before we got out of golf, I was standing behind Rory McIlroy at the Irish Open in Fota with my son and grandson. Well, that's why I have the glasses now. But anyway, when he hit the driver, I couldn't see the ball. I couldn't see it. It went, you know what I mean? I lost it because it went so far. I just couldn't see it. And that I didn't really get what people were talking about, you know. But anyway, Limerick Media is the program. Derwynne, oh yeah, so your bet is, just to recap, so that everybody will know how good you are, your bet for the US Open before we leave golf.
I'd be going for Lowry.
Well, you would?
Yeah.
Certainly is an each way bet.
Yeah,
I'd go for
25
Lowry.
to 1 is a good
I'd
each
go
way
for
bet.
Lowry double as well to win that and the British Open.
Look away.
No, I would.
We'll have to pay you a fee then, won't we? If you win all that money.
Well, you have to hear first.
Maybe we should make a little swindle up and syndicate.
Yeah, and Derwynne is going for Shane Lowry for the US Open in Torrey Pines and for the British Open in St Andrews, is it?
St George's, Royal St George's. Kent.
Yeah. The Final Whistle is the program on lermedia.tv, and our email is info@lermedia.tv. Before we finish up the program tonight, we are going to have a brief look at, I suppose, you do some running, Martin, don't you? You do some cross-country, you? And
I did a bit, did some road running. You do this stuff as a kid, and next thing you play team sports, and then as you become, you come to the end of the team sport space, and next thing you go back to something that you did as a kid. So I went back running there for a good while, yeah.
Yeah, I remember doing a fun run for charity. Now, I hasten to add, I was never a runner. I was never an athletics man. I was just a cornerback mulliker on a hurling and football team. That was it. I don't mind admitting that. One of the people that was to stop the best hurler on the pitch. I said, Martin, I had the pleasure one time of doing a jog, I suppose, a 20-kilometre jog with Marcus O'Sullivan. I don't remember Marcus O'Sullivan.
I do.
Yeah, he was from Cork. We were doing a charity thing. But, I mean, I was on to him after the thing, and the amount, you had no idea the dedication of these people. You see them on television at the flash meetings and the cameras and interview after, and they're after winning. The amount of sacrifice that people have to make for their craft, the amount of sacrifice they have to make. And I suppose it's the same with and it's an individual sport, as you said. It's up to you but also it's up to the team that you have around you that you trust. You know, like of course you probably knew the great Jerry Kieran. Did you ever get to meet him?
I didn't get to meet him.
Yeah,
No.
I remember seeing him. I met him twice. Jerry, he was an awful lot in athletics altogether in Ireland, in my opinion. You know, he's one of the good guys. You know, tough. What's her name? Kieran McGeehan was his pupil there. You know, she
Yeah.
won a silver medal in the Europeans, did she?
She did, and she kind of like went. I think she was coached under Jerry for a while, and she then moved to the UK to base herself there. I think to work in the UK, just to, I suppose, bring her to the next level after she kind of lost her confidence there for a while. But and then I think Jerry got her back on the road to start believing in herself again, and start recovering from these injuries that she was getting. And then she went to the UK, and like she just progressed and progressed and progressed to have that great result in the Europeans. So it just shows that perseverance and self-belief is a lot in sport. It's not just all about the talent. It's about, you know, what's in between the ears as well, you know, the mind games and getting your head right.
And I suppose we should celebrate really. I mean, I know Derwynne, you're over in Great Britain. They have a huge, I mean, they had the Olympics in 2012. There's an awful lot of money, and rightly so, going into the schools for athletics and for sport in general. But in Ireland, we are small, and we don't really, I don't think we really pay enough attention to physical exercise and training and running like that. You know, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know much about the athletic scene in Ireland, although most of our athletes that have seemed to have made it have had to go, like Sonia O'Sullivan. I think Sonia O'Sullivan from Cove, running around the streets of Cove. She had to, well, I suppose she had to go abroad to America, to Australia, I suppose, to improve themselves. I don't mind them doing that, provided they're funded as well to do so, you know.
Yeah.
And
there's a married couple in UL at the moment. They took the Waterford athlete Thomas Parr under their wing there, and they're a husband and wife team, and one does the nutrition and the biochemistry, and the other one is physical and sports psychology type coaching. But they've got a team going in UL, and they're starting to get some funding for it. So you probably, if what you were saying now, Pat, if you'd said it 7 or 8 years ago before they came here, you would have been a real fortune teller. But it is happening. They're starting to recognize that athletics is a worthwhile sport in Ireland. But again, it's not been given anything like the proper funding. Having said that, none of the sports efforts in Ireland are getting anything like the proper funding compared to.
Well, what you have in Ireland, I meant to touch it before we finish. I know, Derwynne, you probably might never read this in the papers across Derwynne is residing in London for his sins, but that's all right, Derwynne, we forgive you for that. The newspaper, we have the scenario here, Jimmy, of the FAI and Martin, who's paying Robbie Keane reputedly a 6-figure sum for the last 2 years to do nothing. Now, the backstory of that is Robbie Keane was appointed an assistant with Mick McCarthy on a temporary basis to look after the Irish soccer team. Mick McCarthy stepped down. Stephen Kinney was appointed. Obviously, he wanted to pick his own men, and he had no role for Robbie Keane. But Robbie Keane had a 4-year contract. I'm not saying that wrong with contract. But if the figures are correct in the newspapers, paying him, of course, the appointment was made by Delaney, another one of his legacy issues, and John Delaney we're talking about. We can't say much about him because there's a big court case coming up. But however, if they're paying a man 250 grand a year for the last 2.5 years to do nothing, lads, and we'll shot the money for junior soccer and all around the place, you could start somewhere. Jimmy, are you familiar with that story?
Listen, I am, yeah. I touched on this either last week or the previous week. It's immoral to think that the team that wins the League of Ireland if they won it 2 years on the bounce, they would get paid less than Robbie Keane gets for sitting on his arse because some crook gave him a contract. But I mean, it's the ultimate stupidity. They brought him in on the back of the Mick McCarthy contract, right? And how fucking stupid do you have to be to give Mick McCarthy a contract that ends at the qualifications, which was 18 months in the future, and give somebody on his backroom team a 4-year contract? So he was Mick McCarthy's choice. They gave him a 4-year contract. What I would ask, and I have no hesitation about saying this, and I am ashamed to say he's a Waterford Gurrier, John Delaney, but I wonder how much of that 250,000 is actually going into Robbie Keane's account and is not been split into some account out in feckin' Brazil, which is where John Delaney's 100,000 loan to the FAI wound up going.
Just for the benefit of our listeners, all the views expressed on this show are the views of contributors on the show, not necessarily of the. But Martin, before we finish up,
and sorry, Pat, I have left my libel insurance lapse, so you're wasting your time coming after me.
Martin, you work out in Mary I. I mean, Mary I have a good tradition of sporting prowess, both in hurling and football and other areas as well. So they have a big emphasis, I presume, Martin, in that. You know, it is what I call a healthy college to be in.
Yeah, they promote all the sports really. So there's teams in rugby, soccer, GA, and these are not just male only sports. Like they're male and female, so it's very inclusive. You know, they have a camogie team. I think they have a ladies soccer team. They have a men's rugby team. You know, so it's constantly evolving. Plus, there's other sort of sports as well that wouldn't be mainstream sports that some of the students would play, and they offer scholarships every year as well. You know, so specifically GA scholarships. So it's very strong in the sporting arena, and they've won Fitzgibbon Cups, which are cups specifically for the colleges across the country.
Yeah.
So they've been very strong in that space, but they would push it and encourage all the students to participate in sport and kind of like a healthy living, you know. So they're very much pro that.
That's good to hear. Now we've come to the end of this edition of the Final Whistle, but before we go, Derwynne has for our viewers later on, we'll put this up now. Shane Lowry for the US Open in Torrey Pines, and Shane Lowry for the double for the Open in Royal St. George's as well. And of course we have that Slovenian cyclist to watch out for in the Tour de France at the end of the month, lads. We'll be flying it.
Yeah. Primoz Roglic.
Yeah, you are now.
The guy to watch out for, yeah. It's probably his last chance to win it, so.
We'll put his picture up for people to look at it. And from Derwynne Honan, from Martin Waters, and from Jimmy O'Brien, lads, it's been a blast, and I really appreciate you taking your time out to appear on the Final Whistle. And this show will be up on all our platforms within the next hour, I'd say. I'm looking over to the person who'll be doing all the work behind the scenes. That's Mary. And it's tribute to Mary because she puts all the bells and whistles on these, which is fantastic. To an old fogey like me, I wouldn't have a clue, you know. Well, that's my excuse anyway. But from this edition of the Final Whistle, from Derwynne Honan, from Martin Waters, and from James O'Brien, good evening, guys, and thanks very much for being here, and take care.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.